Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Echo Worm Live. Today, obviously, is a little different. We had some technical issues yesterday. We usually do these every other Thursday, and yesterday there were some things going on my end that the stream wasn't quite working the way that it needed to. So I'm going to be repeating most of the questions that we talked about yesterday and going over just anything that you guys have been asking throughout the last couple weeks about content that we cover on the channel, whether it be the Percy Jackson books, Hunger Games, Harry Potter, which is no longer on the channel but over on our Vimeo page, and just some general questions about the channel and about me and the recording process in general. So if you are in the chat, I would love to hear questions from you guys in the chat. At the moment, my stats are not showing up, so I'm not sure how many people we have in the chat. But let's start with a question that we didn't get to yesterday. The first one is from Utmanders, or UT Manders, who says, what was your inspiration for the French son of Boreas? So Boreas is a character that we see in The Lost Hero, which is the first book of the Heroes of Olympus series, the sequel series of Percy Jackson. The main trio head to Quebec City, and they meet Boreas, who is, in Greek mythology, he's like the god of the northern wind, I believe, or the spirit of the northern wind, however you want to describe it. He has two sons, one of which I decided to use a very thick, like rural Ontario or even like Atlantic Canada accent, and the other one I used a pretty aggressive French accent. I think that's kind of how they're described in the books, but I'm sure I took a little liberties with them. And the inspiration for the French voice, I think I mentioned this yesterday, was Sacha Baron Cohen's performance in Les Mis. So yeah, it's a little campy, and I did that on purpose, but very, very, very satisfied myself with the way that it turned out. I had a blast reading it. So Zara Jeffers says, can you read the rest of the Percy Jackson series? Yes, currently we are on Mark of Athena. So there should be one chapter that shows up a day at 11 o'clock Eastern. So you can find those chapters on the channel. If you want to jump ahead a few weeks, you're more than welcome to do so by becoming a patron. As little as $3 a month, you get about 3 weeks in advance of the Percy Jackson stuff and a couple months in advance of some other books. We've already finished Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes on Patreon. We've already finished Voyage of the Dawn Treader on Patreon, and we are currently working on Dune, and Dune probably won't hit the regular channel until July. So if you want to be in advance of what is on the main channel right now, feel free to pledge $3 a month or more over on patreon.com. There's a link in the description below. Paris Mitchell says, what is your least favorite Percy Jackson book? This is a common take, but it's also a controversial take because the people that really like this book really like this book. My least favorite is Sea of Monsters. I think Sea of Monsters is too short and doesn't have a lot of material, but at the same time overstuffed with material that is inconsequential to the rest of the series. I've gone into detail in previous live streams, just talking about how out of everything that happens in Sea of Monsters, not a lot sets up anything else in the rest of the series. The only two things that are really notable for me is it is kind of the official start of the romantic feelings between Percy and Annabeth, as well as a little bit into Annabeth's backstory. We get a little more out of her as a character. But otherwise, I think, for me personally, you can absolutely have your own subjective opinions, but I think Sea of Monsters for me is definitely my least favorite. Rain says, to be a patron, just bring someone back from the dead. You're more than welcome to. Joseph Morel says, out of curiosity, how far are you on the Percy Jackson books on said Patreon? So right now, I think on the regular channel, we just did chapter 14 of Mark of Athena. We are on chapter 29, maybe 30 now on Patreon. So like I said, we're a little over 3 weeks in advance. So we do a daily chapter on YouTube, and we also do a daily chapter over on Patreon, but at about 20 to 25 chapters in advance of that. So the full first half of Mark of Athena is available in its own full-length video over on Patreon. As soon as we hit chapter 26 on the main channel, that'll be up on the channel as well. Let's see here. Skylar S says, the empathy... Yes, I did forget about the empathy link. The empathy link part was dumb because Rick wound up doing the dream thing anyway. Yeah, a little bit of both. They don't use it a ton, but he did set it up. So I should say that of things of consequence, that is included in one of them that is set up in Sea of Monsters. I guess it's explained by Grover being a satyr and having different rules. But yes, hi. Hi, Skylar. Nice to have you here. Let's go to a question from Xantheros Animations, who is asking in regards to The Lost Hero, where is Percy? Now, I don't want to spoil things necessarily if you haven't read Lost Hero. We'll talk a little bit more about the series order of Percy Jackson. That seems to be a topic that we cover every week on these live streams, which I'm very happy to cover. But Percy is not in The Lost Hero. It's part of why people really struggle to get through the first book of the Heroes of Olympus series, even though it is literally a straight continuation on from the story from the Percy Jackson books. But a lot of people don't like The Lost Hero because Percy's not in it. He's not the narrator. He's not in the book at all. He's mentioned several times because he's missing. And so if your question is, why isn't Percy in the book? The reason is Rick Riordan needed to have a book introduce new characters. And in order to do that, he needed Percy not to be in the book. And if you're going to start a series, it's better to start the series without the character that everybody wants and introduce him in the second one than have him be in the first one and then cut him out for the second one, because that's going to alienate a lot of readers for your second book. And instead, he just wanted to start things off the bat. But Percy is missing. The secret of where he is revealed at the end of the book, and then we get his own POV about what happened, why he's missing going forward in the second book. Skylar says, nice haircut. Haven't had a chance to say that. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Joseph Morrill says, it's kind of interesting how in the second series, Rick kind of just forgets about the empathy link. I get that Juno said, no, fool, you gotta be lost. He doesn't forget about it, and I'm trying to remember which book it happens in. Someone in the chat that remembers better than I do. The empathy link is broken, and I'm trying to remember what breaks it. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the empathy link is broken because of Percy jumping into the river Styx in the fifth book. I could be wrong about that, but I think that's why it doesn't work. I think they actually explicitly say that in the books. I'm just trying to remember when it is. Off the top of my head, I think it's when Percy jumps in the river Styx that the empathy link is broken. Let's see here. Rain says, are you doing two-parters now since you don't want to get copyrighted? No, it has nothing to do with copyright. It's the reason I'm doing two-parters is my recordings are more than 10 hours long. And unless there's a couple different ways to get like multi-hour upload availability on YouTube. I currently don't have that, and I don't want to pay for it. And so the options to me are to either not have the full versions or, yeah, I mean, those are kind of my only options. So if it takes me 13 hours to read all 52 chapters of Mark of Athena, then I'm going to split them in half. That way we can get as full of a version on either side of that 10-hour mark as I can. That's why I'm doing the two-parters. So that's actually why Hunger Games is going to be in 3 parts. That's why the longer versions of the Harry Potter books are in 3 separate parts. But yeah, it's because I can't fit it into 10 hours. Skylar S. mentions Lost Hero. When Grover tries, yes, that is when he tries and it fails, and I think it's because that takes place after Percy's dip in the river Styx. Paris Mitchell says, you probably answered this already, but who's your favorite Greek god? Well, if you're asking about my godly parent, that like the personality test that you take for the Percy Jackson books, I've always ended up with Hades, but my personal favorite god is probably Nemesis, the goddess, or excuse me, not Nemesis, sorry, Nike, the goddess of victory, known as Victory or Victoria on the Roman side of things, but yes, Nike is probably my favorite goddess or god, period. Question from Joseph Morrill says, I hope one day we can have all these in one video since YouTube lets you do so. I've got 14 hours to spare. Well, you're welcome to read all of what we have so far. I'm trying to think. I'm sure it's upwards of 30 hours for just the Percy Jackson books at the moment, and we're not even through the 3rd book completely. So, or the 8th book, I guess. But yes, I'd be very happy to do so once we get that opportunity. I know I follow a YouTuber who has all of the Game of Thrones books done, and those, I think her versions of them are like 50 hours long, and it's like, I'll do it. I'll do it. But that's a long video to try to sit through for. Obviously, I'm not doing it continuously. But let's go to a question from John Dudley, who says, "Where can we find your Harry Potter recordings?" So the reason that the Harry Potter recordings aren't on YouTube is a very long story. That's why we don't have the original channel anymore. It's kind of a mess, kind of a story that I don't really want to dig into too much on here, but they are available for free for everybody on Patreon and Vimeo.com, the links of which are available below in the description of this live stream, as well as in the channel description if you just click the channel on YouTube. Available for free. You don't have to become a member on Patreon to listen to those. They are available for free, also available on Vimeo. There's a link to a showcase where you can see all... I did 8 different Harry Potter recordings because I redid the first one in the British version. I also have 2 of the world building books. I have Quidditch Through the Ages I just did, as well as the Tales of Beetle the Bard are available there as well. And then eventually, once I finish Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, I will upload those in individual act videos. Let's go to a question from Large Uwu, who says, "Are we able to request books for you to read?" The answer is yes, and I'd be very happy to do so. The one thing I will say is, if you can see over either of my shoulders, my list of books that I'm trying to get through at the moment is extensive. So I mention this every week. I have my list behind me, between my hands here, of the books that I get to in my free time, and then I have my immediate book pile. My immediate book pile right now is Fire and Blood, which is the prequel book to Game of Thrones. If you're familiar with the show House of the Dragon, which is what this live stream's thumbnail came from, Season 2 is coming out soon. I'm hoping to have as much of Fire and Blood out and available for you as possible so you guys can catch up to where the series is. But then the other 2 are the 2 active books that we are currently doing for members and patrons, which are the Mark of Athena and the first Dune book, which, if you're familiar with the Dune books, the first Dune book encompasses both parts of the movies. So Dune Part 1, I guess, is the first half of Dune, and Dune Part 2 is the second half of Dune. Joseph Morrill says, "I do want to say love all the voices you've given all the characters in the Percy Jackson books." Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Some people don't. I have been criticized for certain accents or what people have perceived as stereotyping of certain characters. I try to be regional with all of my accents. The only exceptions I will say are probably the main characters. I didn't want to give Percy too much of an East Coast accent because of the fact that I, A, don't do one very well, and B, I wanted it to be a little more just general American. I have a pretty heavy Midwestern accent, and I have to tone that down when I do all the main characters. But I do regional accents for characters like Frank specifically. I do a pretty heavy West Canadian accent. And then the one that I've been criticized most for is Hazel's mom. I do kind of a Bayou, Louisiana accent that people don't seem to like very much. But thank you very much. I appreciate it. Anna says, "Don't mind the broken down chapters. You do what's best for you." Well, thank you very much. Question for you. Is there a book in the Percy Jackson series that you'd love to see a live action recreation of? For me, it's Last Olympian or Labyrinth. For me, it's Labyrinth. It's definitely Labyrinth. Battle of the Labyrinth is my favorite book in the original Percy Jackson series, and I have always wanted to see it on screen. I'm a big fan of Battle of the Labyrinth. The CGI budget is going to be extensive. There's a lot that happens in Labyrinth and a lot of monsters that they come across, but I would love to see it on screen. So if they get that far, I'd be very, very excited for Season 4 of Percy Jackson. Skylar says, "It would be so cool to hear Percy with his New York City accent." Not the way I would do it, because trust me, like I said, my East Coast accents are... It's probably... Of all the American accents that I can do, or can attempt to do, my Mid-Atlantic is probably the worst. Melissa Smith says, "First time here, I came across your audios late one night when I couldn't sleep. Really enjoying your readings. You can tell you enjoy what you were reading." Thank you very much. That means a lot to me. There are some books I read that you might come across on the channel. I try to hide them a little bit because maybe I'm embarrassed by them, but there are some books where by the end of them, I'm kind of phoning it in. But with the Percy Jackson books, I've never had to phone in a performance or a reading, for lack of a better term. And I really enjoy it, and I really enjoy the community that we built here because of it. So thank you very much, Melissa. Skylar says, "I love Hazel's mama's voice. Grandma Zhang too." Thank you very much. "My parents are from the New York Metro. Go Giants." I have a buddy who's a big Jets fan. I can't comment on it. All of my favorite teams are from... The only East Coast team that I cheer for is DC United. So I that's the only 2 cents I have. So if you're a soccer fan from New York, the Red Bulls just killed my favorite soccer team, and I'm not happy about it. But other than that, I have nothing against New York. Let's go to a question from Hachkar, who says, 2 separate questions here. Hachkar says, can you read the 6th book, please? And PJO1993 says, can you please read Chalice of the Gods? So there was a question earlier about, can we read the rest of the Percy Jackson series? Yes. How we're doing things and how the Percy Jackson books were written, or how they take place, is we were given the first 5 Percy Jackson books. That was the first series. So this goes all the way from Lightning Thief to Last Olympian. After that came The Lost Hero, and that takes place directly after Last Olympian. And then we get the Heroes of Olympus series. So there's 5 books in the Heroes of Olympus series, and so the 5 Percy Jackson books are succeeded by the 5 Heroes of Olympus books. Then Rick Riordan decided to write the Trials of Apollo, but he also came back to the Percy Jackson books. And now there is a 6th Percy Jackson book, which takes place after the Heroes of Olympus, not after Percy Jackson. And so we're not reading Chalice of the Gods right after Last Olympian, because it doesn't take place after Last Olympian. It takes place after Blood of Olympus, which is the last of the Heroes of Olympus books. So Chalice of the Gods, yes, it's the 6th Percy Jackson book, but it's also the 11th book in the series. And so how we're reading things is 5 Percy Jackson, 5 Heroes of Olympus, and then books 6, which is already out, and then 7 and 8 of Percy Jackson, which have yet to come out. And then we will do Trials of Apollo, and then we will do Sun and the Star, because that's the series order. So it sounds a little messy, but that's the case. So Chalice of the Gods is book 11. We will get there after we are done with book 10. Right now we're on book 8. Question from Anna L., who says, a little off topic, I noticed a Starbucks drink. What is your go-to drink? I have 2 of these a day, and it's really sad and expensive. But it was half off today. I don't know if it is where you are, but it was half off Starbucks this afternoon. So my wife and I went. This is a strawberry acai refresher with lemonade, and I specifically asked for no berries in it. So the drink comes with like strawberry pieces in it. I hate wet fruit pieces, which sounds really specific, but I don't like things in my drinks, and so I don't like boba tea. I don't like anything like that. So this is a strawberry acai refresher with lemonade and no berries. Joseph Morrill says, can't wait till you get to House of Hades. That's my favorite Percy Jackson book in general. It is widely regarded as the best of the Percy Jackson books. My personal favorite is Mark of Athena, but House of Hades is a very close second. So yes, we are coming very close. Last night I finished recording chapter 32, can't read Roman numerals. I'm done with the first 37 chapters of Mark of Athena, so I have to record 15 more, and then I personally am on House of Hades, and then they usually show up on Patreon a few days later, because I gotta edit everything. So, Melissa Smith says, do you only read sci-fi fantasy, or do you take recommendations? 2 separate questions, I suppose. Do you take recommendations? I don't only read sci-fi and fantasy. In fact, I would love to branch out. My book pile behind me, it is a lot of young adult or late teen sci-fi and fantasy, and that's kind of what I grew up reading, and so that's why this channel has so much of it. Game of Thrones, yes, is fantasy, but especially the early books are less fantasy and more mystery political thriller. Behind me, underneath this ear, you can see this red book. That is House of Cards. You might be familiar with the Kevin Spacey TV show. It was based on a British book originally that is called House of Cards. That is a political thriller that I have been reading through chapter by chapter and would like to have on the channel once I finish it. So there are plenty of books out there that I would love to read that are not sci-fi and fantasy. In fact, one of them that I just finished, it's going to be in the playlist that's titled YA Singles, or Young Adult Singles. It's a book called Skellig. It was one of the books that inspired Harry Potter, which it has nothing to do with Harry Potter, and it's not even fantasy necessarily. But the themes in Skellig, it came out in the mid to late 90s. The themes from it very much influenced J.K. Rowling's writing. And so It's been a favorite book of mine for a long time, and I finally got around to reading it for the channel. I think that comes out on either Monday or Tuesday, so look for that. That is not sci-fi or fantasy. It's a very, very good book, especially, this is a little personal, and it's not something that my wife and I have ever experienced, but we have friends, we're at that age right now where a lot of our friends are having children. Obviously, we have a child of our own, I've mentioned several times on the channel, but the story of Skellig has to do with a faulty pregnancy, and then the repercussions of having a sick baby, or a baby that's having to go back and forth through the hospital for several months. It's a really sad story, but a really triumphant story in the end. So if you guys are interested in that, I think it's about 3 to 4 hours long. Like I said, should come out Monday or Tuesday in the afternoon. But yes, I'm very happy to take recommendations. I do have a very significant pile of stuff, so I might not get to it for the next calendar year. I know it sounds like a long time away, but I would be very happy, to do so. TKD Cuber says, have you read The Westing Game? I remember I loved that book in middle school. I have been asked that before on a live stream. I don't know if it was you or someone else. I have not read it. It is on my list, and it's actually pretty high up on my list. So I would love to get to it sometime in the next couple months here. I do have to buy it first. I've never read it. Question from Rain, outside of the chat, who said, do you have memberships yet? I do not. So an issue is happening right now with the channel because of what happened with the old channel and the way that we set things up on the new channel. We did have monetization for about a week, which was very good. And we had about, I think, a dozen members, and this happened to the old channel. But we got the channel demonetized for this, the reason being that we have stolen content on the channel. This happened with our old channel. I appealed for it and was successful on the old channel. I appealed for it on the new channel and got denied. I sent a lot of angry emails and was in a pretty heated conversation with a representative from YouTube, because I don't believe that they watched the appeal, which sounds really weird, but I thought it was very clear in our appeal video that this is me. I'm the person who reads the books on the channel. We have a team of people who edit stuff, and like, the content on our channel is our own. Now, I know that because of the fact that it appeared on the other channel and it appeared elsewhere, I know people have copied our material. I know that's why they're skeptical about this being our own original content. So hopefully by the time that we're able to try to remonetize the channel, we have to wait 90 days. That is August 4th, I believe. Hopefully by that time we have enough new content on the channel where we can prove that, yes, this is original content, and then we can be monetized, and then we can have memberships. So all of that out of the way to say that no, memberships are not currently active. And so if you are a member on YouTube right now and you haven't been getting your perks, please do manually cancel your membership. YouTube doesn't automatically do it if memberships are suspended. So please do that. I don't want you guys to be wasting your money when you can get the exact same thing not interrupted over on Patreon. So if you're willing to jump ship over to Patreon, that is where all of the advanced content is right now. So you're more than welcome to do so. Links to Patreon are in the description below. Long-winded, I know, I do apologize. Oliver Finstad says, Halla, gratulerer med dagen, Tai. 17 Mai, Ida. Yes, today is, if you're unfamiliar, today is Norwegian National Day, or we call it 17 Mai. It's the 17th of May. It's basically our 4th of July. In Norway. It represents the Constitution of Norway being written in the year 1814. That was the year that Norway, I don't know the exact details. I do apologize, Oliver. As far as I am aware, it was in 1814 that both Sweden and Norway became independent of Denmark, and Norway didn't necessarily have the resources to become independent, but they also didn't want to stay merged with Sweden as part of Sweden, and so that's where we got a union between Norway and Sweden, and out of that comes the National Day. And so today is 17 Mai, which literally means 17th of May. So happy 17 Mai to you as well. Glad 17 Mai. Joseph Morrill says, who is your favorite character in the Percy Jackson series? Villain and hero-wise. For me, Luke is my favorite villain, and I love Nico. My favorite character in the Percy Jackson series is Nico. I think he is the best paced character, if that makes any sense. I think his story, from when he is introduced in the third book to his current story up with Sun in the Star, I think it is paced perfectly. He's never really a narrator until we get to a certain point. We don't necessarily understand his feelings and motivations until we get further on. And I just think he's so well written and so complicated and so well paced with the complexities of those emotions. He remains a mystery to us as readers for so long that by the time we finally understand him and understand his motivations, it's very, very well developed. Favorite villain? If Luke can be considered a villain, then Luke probably, because I think his motivations are also very, very clear. Apart from that, I don't know necessarily. Melissa Smith says, thank you for answering. I will look forward to listening to more. Lots to get through. Yes. My goal is to have a lot of content for you guys on the channel. That way I can offer anything that you guys want to read or that is appealing to you without having to be... If you're not a Percy Jackson fan, then obviously right now you're probably like, where is the other non-Percy Jackson stuff? So, Paris Mitchell says, when I'm listening and remember that this is someone reading, I always picture you reading in a dark room with a flashlight. Honestly, I get that. I totally get that. Yeah, this is where I record. This is my studio here. So, if you need a visual of what that looks like, boom, there you go. But yes, when I started, it was literally me sitting on my couch in the middle of the night, just talking while my family was asleep. So, but I totally get that. That is always how I've imagined audiobooks too. Just people sitting in a dark studio reading a book very, very cautiously. So. Joseph Morrill says, do you plan to read the Magnus Chase books later down the line? I've been rereading those books because of your videos. Yes. My immediate plan for... so after we get done with Heroes of Olympus, and after basically after we get done with all of like the main 12 Percy Jackson books, so that includes the new ones, Wrath of the Triple Goddess comes out at the end of September. As soon as we're done with those 12 books, I am going to... not go straight to Trials of Apollo. I'm instead going to go to the Kane Chronicles and knock out the 3 Kane Chronicles books back to back to back. And then I will go to Trials of Apollo. And once we're done with Trials of Apollo, then we'll get to Magnus Chase. So Magnus Chase is going to be the last Rick Riordan series that I cover. But yes, my goal is to get there eventually. I can't tell you when we're going to get there. It probably won't be until next year sometime. I know that seems like a long ways away, but if you're interested in them with an audiobook reading and you don't want to wait for me, then please feel free to go find another channel. Because, like I said, it will be the last Rick Riordan property that I read. Let's go to a question from Bree, who says, I have questions I want to ask. This is in regards to my own writings. I have questions I want to ask about other chapters. Is it okay to comment or ask on those videos? Yes. So if you guys were unaware, I have my own writing on the channel. I've kind of been doing this experiment, and I'm sure if I ever try to publish it, my publishers are going to be really pissed at me. But I have been writing chapter by chapter of a book that I've basically been formulating since I was 13 years old, and it's existed in several forms. Originally, it was pretty much a ripoff of Divergent, and now it's developed into something very, very, very different. But I started officially writing the official first draft in December. I wrote the first chapter and then recorded myself doing it. And then put it up on the channel for you. So the first 8 chapters of that are available in the playlist called The Radiation Effect. That is my own personal writing. I am claiming ownership over all of it because it's my own property. But you are more than welcome to ask questions on anything you have. We're not far enough in it to have major spoilers yet, but if you have questions about characters, about plot lines that you're not sure if I've forgotten about or where they're going, you are absolutely more than welcome to do so. I want this writing alongside you experiment to be kind of a collaborative effort. Not that I'm asking you to write the book with me or for me, but I want to get feedback as I'm writing it because not that it will affect the story, but it might affect the way that I present ideas, and so that was part of the idea going forward when I wanted to start writing this. But so yes, to answer your question, yes, please do ask questions. Infected Phantom says, have you read the Percy Jackson series before? Was it the show that got you into the series or just a friend? Yes, I've read the Percy Jackson series I think this is my third time reading through it fully. I started reading the Percy Jackson series around the time the film came out, which would have been around the time that the 5th book came out. And so I think I was a 6th grader. I had a friend who was a huge Percy Jackson fan. We were in our kind of world geography class, and we were studying Greece and ancient Greek history and that sort of thing. And I took an interest in it, and I was talking about it, and he goes, well, there's like a book series that's kind of based around it, right? And he got me into it. And so I haven't talked to this friend in a long time. I hope he's doing all right. I think last I knew he was getting married, but Joey, if you're out there, thank you very much for starting what is now a passion of mine. But yes, I have read the book several times. This is not my first cold read through. It is my first cold read through of Chalice of the Gods. I've never read Chalice of the Gods before. I've never read Sun and the Star before, and I've never finished Trials of Apollo. So that'll be interesting to see where we go, or at least how my reading is affected by that going forward. This is like my 5th read through of Mark of Athena. Mark of Athena is my favorite book. Question from Yasin Yafi, who says, not to get personal or anything, but how old are you? I won't give you specifics. I think there's a little bit of personal privacy that I can still maintain on this channel. Obviously, with the stuff behind me, you can probably tell where I live or where I'm from. I'm in my mid-20s. So when I say I was a 6th grader when the 5th Percy Jackson book came out, you can probably do the math and figure out how old I am specifically by that. But yes, I was born around the time that the Harry Potter books came out. Joseph Morrill says, any video games or TV shows that inspire you? Oh my gosh, every single TV show I've ever watched inspires me. The ones that have had the biggest impact on me as a content creator and a writer, I grew up with Harry Potter. I grew up with Star Wars. Star Wars Episode 3 was the first PG-13 movie I ever saw in theaters. I've kind of fallen out of love with Star Wars for a variety of reasons. I think that's the case with a lot of Star Wars fans in the last 10 years. But I do have Star Wars content on the channel. I was a big Avatar: The Last Airbender fan. That was kind of my obsession prior to Percy Jackson. And then was really into the Hunger Games in high school, and then I kind of fell out of reading. And then when I got to college, I really started diving into films and TV shows. Breaking Bad, huge one. Game of Thrones, huge one. Video games, not specifically. I've never been a huge video game, not fan necessarily. I've never had time for video games. And so people always ask if I wanted to start a gaming channel. I'm like, I just don't play video games. But yeah, I think anything that is in the major popular culture has influenced me in some way at some point. So whether it be Harry Potter, whether it be Chronicles of Narnia, whether it be Percy Jackson, whether it be Avatar: The Last Airbender, Game of Thrones, anything like that has influenced me in some way. Cordy says, who do you think we'll see in Wrath of the Triple Goddess? This is the Percy Jackson book that's coming out in September. I'm hoping to see the Hunters again, the Hunters of Artemis. That's a good question. I've never really thought about who I want to see again in the series. There are a lot of fun characters. I think it would be very interesting to see Circe again, the witch from the second book, Sea of Monsters, who used to work with Reyna and her sister. I think... I'm trying to think here. Medusa, again, might be just bringing back very old, very original villains, I think would be very fun. But in terms of friendly characters, it would be cool to see the Hunters again, I think. The last time we saw them was Lost Hero? Maybe, unless I'm missing something. One that might be really fun to see again is an underworld version of Gabe. We haven't really heard anything from Gabe since Sea of Monsters-ish. But I think it would be very, very interesting to see Gabe, not Gabe's perspective on things, but just have that run in the underworld, whether they run through Fields of Asphodel or Fields of Punishment or wherever you think Gabe is. Let's see here. Aniket Kajale, I do apologize if I've butchered the pronunciation there. Love your work. How many times do you read a chapter before recording it? Typically 0. I usually come into every recording cold. And the only reason for that is time. So I do stop myself if I make errors and then go back about a paragraph and then edit everything together in post, which is the exact same way that I put all the chapters together. Some people legitimately thought that with my Lightning Thief recording that I read the entire thing 8 hours straight through. Not the case. I read chapter by chapter. But I typically come in cold. I have not read many of these chapters in Mark of Athena in close to 8 years, maybe. And so there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of just thoughts in the chapters that are completely foreign to me because I don't remember them. And so I do come in cold. If there's something that I feel like I didn't perform well as I'm reading through it, then I'll typically go back and redo it. If there's a voice or if there's a character I missed or whatever, or a little intricacy in what I can do as a vocal performer, then I'll typically go back and do that a few paragraphs later. But yeah, I typically come into everything cold. Lego Master Reviews says, have you ever read the Dune books? I have. I love the Dune books. Currently, we are going through Dune on Patreon. I believe we're up to chapter 3 now. I think there's 48 or so chapters in Dune, and they're not really chapters. Dune isn't really separated. It's hard to describe Dune to people who've never read it. It's got these little snippets. So it's more like you're reading a play. You're reading a book, but each chapter is more like a scene in a play. So you don't typically jump around between locations within a chapter. It's very much you're watching a TV show and it's a scene in a TV show, which you'd think lends itself very well to a TV show or a film like crossover. It doesn't, because each chapter has to do with the different thoughts in people's heads. It's very much a narrative book. But yes, I love the Dune books. They should reach the main channel around the end of July, early August. But if you want them in advance and want to come along with us right now, we are currently doing those over on Patreon. Nate says, do you ever find the romance between some of the characters a little cringe? I do. I hate Jason and Piper's romance. Please, no spoilers in the chat. So don't bring up anything about the future of their relationship. But yes, I have always found their romance a little much. Not much. I don't know how to describe it. I've never loved Piper as a character, and I've really never loved Jason as a character. And I think their relationship, romantic or otherwise, has always felt a little forced. And I know that's the point. I know that's how it's introduced, as a fake relationship. But yeah, I've never connected with it the way some other people have. Whereas with Frank and Hazel, I think it's intentionally cringy. And I don't find it hard to read through. I find it funny to read through because the characters are 14, 15, 16 years old. And it makes sense to me because I've been there, and I know people who have gone through relationships that are very similar to this. Let's see here. Logan Harvey says, I don't know if you've answered this before, but do you ever plan to read the Kane Chronicles or Magnus Chase? Yes, I just answered that. I will answer it again very happily. After we're done with Heroes of Olympus and the most recent 2 Percy Jackson books, I will be jumping to the Kane Chronicles. We'll do the Kane Chronicles, and then we'll jump back to do Trials of Apollo and Sun and the Star, and then after that, then I will do Magnus Chase. Melissa Smith says, that's a great approach and attitude to have with your channel. Fan base is great, but privacy matters. Well, thank you. Yeah, I don't, my wife has appeared on my other channel, and when my son was really little, he appeared, but we've kind of taken an approach where we want to keep our family's privacy and safety. Not that we consider what I do here a celebrity thing, but you do get some weird comments, and even as a channel with, just about 3,000 subscribers, you do get some really weird comments, and we want to keep him and all of the other, my wife has a lot of young siblings, and so we try to keep them as safe as possible. So, Lego Master Review says, awesome, thanks for your insight, happy to do so. Feel free to ask any more questions that you have. Joseph Morrill says, I see that 21 Pilots poster there. What are your favorite music artists? 21 Pilots, very clearly, if you guys are familiar with my music, if you, I mentioned this before, I have a band that I play bass in and am the lead singer of called Pando. It's Pando. We have an album called Poseidon, like the Greek god. So if you look up Poseidon, Pando, you should find... Where's my hand here? I'm doing things with a reverse camera. It's very hard to do. But this album cover above the 21 Pilots poster is my album, so you guys can listen to that if you want. You'll very obviously see connections with 21 Pilots. I'm a huge alt-rock fan, so I like early 2000s, All-American Rejects. Trying to think of other popular bands from that time that fit that description. Early Fall Out Boy, early Panic at the Disco. Trying to think of anything else. Early Muse, mid Muse probably. But then my drummer, the other guy in the group, he's a huge hip hop fan, and so when he came into the band, our sound shifted significantly. So I always tell people it's somewhere between Kendrick and 21 Pilots is what we fall into. So I listen to a lot of trap, I listen to a lot of hip hop, but my personal music tastes fall pretty close to 21 Pilots. Let's go to a question from Dragon Chief, who says, have you thought about reading the Penderwicks series? You're not the first person to ask that. Yes, I would be very interested to do so. It is on my list. I don't know how far down on my list it is, but it is there. So I'm hoping to get to it eventually. No promises for when we're going to get there. But it is on my list. Let's go to a question from Blue VR. This was in response to my one of the quizzes that we had on the channel. I've been trying to do a weekly quiz for all of our main fandoms. So one of the days of the week, you'll see like a Harry Potter trivia. Another day, you'll see a Percy Jackson trivia. And then we'll try to do that once a week for each of those fandoms. But I think the Harry Potter question was, what was Dudley's first word? And Blue VR says, who is Dudley? Which is fair if you're not familiar with Harry Potter. Dudley is Harry's cousin. So if you're familiar with the Dursleys, those are the people that Harry lives with in the summer. The mother, Petunia Dursley, is Harry's mom's sister. So Harry's maternal aunt, her husband, and their son Dudley. Dudley's the same age as Harry and is basically a bully to him for the first 5 books. Joseph Morrill says, where can I find your album? I hear Poseidon and I go running. You can find it anywhere. Apple Music, Apple Music, Spotify. If Google Play still exists, I'm pretty sure it's there. It might be available on YouTube as well if you look up Pando by Poseidon. But you should be able to find it on all of your music streaming services. Question from Nivset, who says, when will Mark of Athena be available on the channel? So how I do things on the channel is we'll do a chapter a day. And so strictly because I can only promise 2 chapters a day in recording. I'm a busy guy. I have a full-time job outside of this. I have a part-time job outside of this. I have a wife. I have a son. And then I have this. And so what I offer on the channel is as much as I can consistently give you. And so that is 2 chapters a day, one of one property, one of another. Mark of Athena has 52 chapters. I mentioned earlier that I can't fit it all into a 10-hour video, and so I have to split it in 2. Splitting into 52 chapters is 26 chapters. So once we get to the 26th chapter on the channel, then I will compile all of them into one video and give that to you guys as part 1 of 2 of Mark of Athena. And then once we get to chapter 52, then that will be up. So I believe if we're on chapter 14, then in 2 weeks' time, you should see part 1. And then about 3 weeks after that, you should see part 2. So, 1 chapter a day till we get through it. It's a bit of a slog, but that's what I can promise. I will say, though, the first half is available on Patreon, and the second half should be available in a couple weeks here. So around the time that part 1 arrives on the channel, part 2 will arrive over on Patreon. Brianna B says, I've been obsessed with your Percy Jackson series. Thank you so much for getting me through my 10 hours a day work schedule. That's what I'm here to do. I want people, my goal of this channel is for people who don't have the time or the resources or the ability to read these books, grant them the ability to enjoy these properties. I love Rick Riordan's works. I love J.K. Rowling's works. I love all of the properties that I read on the channel. And I want you guys to experience those as well. So I want you guys to share in that through this platform. Very happy to do so. Let's go to a question from Andy Edwards, who says, any chance you can add chapter time markers? I think that's a YouTube issue, and I'm trying to figure out how I can better do it, because as far as I'm aware, all I should be able to do, or all I should have to do, is put the timestamps in the description, and then they should show up in the video. Because I think what you're asking is, can I put the chapters up in the video? what I have done is put the timestamps in the description, which is supposed to trigger that up in the video then. So if they're not showing up in the video, they should still be available in the description. So if you go into the description of each video, you should be able to find links to each of the chapters. Brianna B says, have you thought about doing the Court of Thorns and Roses series? I have. It's on my list. I don't know who suggested that, but yes, I'm familiar with it. I just literally bought the first book last week. I was at Barnes & Noble and I saw it and I went, I think someone suggested that. And so yes, it is on my list. It should join the pile in the next month or so. And then, yeah, we'll get to it when we get to it is kind of the key to all of this. But yes, to answer your question, Andy, if it's not in the video, I'll try to get it fixed, but they should always be in the description where you can jump around between the chapters. Ginger Knitter says, how is Leo not ripped after building the Argo 2? That's a good question. Leo is described as being small and elfish is kind of how he describes himself. I think he describes himself as impish, which is a British term. Americans might not be familiar with the term imp. But he's got very, very sharp, very small features. And so as someone who is very skinny, who eats a lot and it doesn't show up, and I'm very lucky, I understand that a lot of people have the opposite problem. It's one of those, like, some people just have that frame where no matter how much you work out or how well you eat or how much you lift or that sort of thing, like, some people just don't get jacked. It's a thing. It's just a physical thing. And so I think that's the case with Leo. I honestly don't know. The other explanation would be that that he is not physically lifting everything. That he has help, or there's help of magic. That there is magical properties that go into building the Argo 2 that prevents him from lifting and becoming as strong as you would expect him to, given what he's doing in shipbuilding, that sort of thing. Keep in mind, it took them less than a year to build it, so it most certainly was a magical project. Few more questions that are pre-prepared. If you guys have questions that you want answered, feel free to ask them in the chat. I'm always happy to hang around and do so. First one comes from Max Holloway, who says, where do you come up with the tunes for the songs in the books? Now, I'm guessing this is specifically about Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, but there are a couple of other books that I've read through where they have songs in them. For the most part, so specifically with Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is a musical. It's a Hunger Games book, but it is a very musical Hunger Games book. There are probably a dozen songs in Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. And the easy answer for those ones is I took the tunes from the movie. So the movie, I want to say the movie has about 6 or 7 songs from the book in the film and in the soundtrack that are recorded by either Rachel Ziegler or any other characters. I will say, I don't know that the anthem is the same. I took the theme of the anthem, I took from the Hunger Games theme. But for the most part, I tried to stick to what the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes soundtrack sounds like tune-wise. I am a professionally trained musician, and so I am usually able to remember tunes. There were a couple of liberties that I took. One specifically that I know of was the Snow Song. I didn't want to... The ending of each line has like a very melodic play behind it, and I didn't want to stretch that out for too long because I thought it was maybe a little too showy for what it's offering in the book, if that makes any sense. So I cut the note off really short. The other parts, or the other half of that question is there are a number of songs in the book that aren't in the movie or don't have a version in the movie. And so in that case, I either took one of the tunes from the movie that wasn't in the book, which there are a couple. There are a couple of original songs in the movie, and then I try to translate them over as much as possible, given word count and that sort of thing. But in the case of a couple in Ballad and then something in like the Sorting Hat song in Harry Potter. Typically, I just make up a tune in my head. I just kind of freeform it, and occasionally I sound really crappy, and then I re-record it. But for the most part, I try to stick to what the soundtrack has, and then freeform it on my own if that's something I have to do. Good question. I've never been asked about the music before. Elise says, any hopes, ideas, or things you want to see in the next Percy Jackson show? Good question. By next show, I'm guessing you mean next season. And next season is very likely going to cover the entirety of Sea of Monsters. Now, Sea of Monsters, I mentioned earlier in this live stream, is not my favorite book. I also really didn't enjoy the film. And so I'm not really looking forward to season 2, just on those things. But if there's anything I want to see or would like to see, I don't know. I don't know if there's an exact answer from my perspective for that, because what I really am more than anything is curious to see how they do things. One of the big things we mentioned before on the channel is, are they going to go with the Confederate soldiers, or are they going to change them to Nazi soldiers, or are they going to do something completely different? Because the current state of affairs politically in the United States, especially having black cast members, the Confederacy is kind of a no-no right now in terms of pop culture. And so I'm curious to see if they'll stick with that, because it fits with the narrative of the book and the show. But would it come off as insensitive, given that Annabeth is played by a black actress, given that right now the current state of affairs in the United States when it comes to talking about the Confederacy and talking about the South? It'll be interesting. So I'm curious more than anything to see how they do things, to see Clarice's portrayal, to see the CGI effects on Polyphemus, to see are they going to go with the cross-dressing Grover? Like, genuinely, there are questions that I have about the production about season 2 more than anything else. So there's not anything necessarily that I want to see, just more curiosity for it. When it comes to the later seasons, like seasons 4, 5, and 6, if they do get to the Heroes of Olympus in the show, then yes, there's a ton that I want to see. But with season 2, not specifically. Just general curiosities, I will say. John Chambers says, when will Dune be available on the channel? Good question. So how we're doing things with the side books, because we're pretty consistently hitting the Percy Jackson books right now. What we're doing is, when we start each Percy Jackson book, we're going to do it alongside another property. So right now, we're doing Mark of Athena, and we're doing Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is 30 chapters long. Once we're done with Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, we still have 22 chapters left in Mark of Athena. Once we get to that point, we're going to do 2 a day of Mark of Athena, just to get the book done. And so that'll be 11 more days. And then we'll start House of Hades, and at the same time, then we're going to start the 5th of the Chronicles of Narnia books, which is called The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. That, I believe, is 16 chapters, so the same case. First 16 chapters of House of Hades will coincide with Narnia. At the end of that, we'll still have 36 chapters left of House of Hades. So for the next 18 days, we'll have 2 chapters of House of Hades a day. I believe this brings us to about August, at which point Dune will transfer over to the main channel. If you would like to be ahead of Dune by several months, which to me seems like a good deal, but I am also the guy whose money it is, who gets the money from it. You're more than welcome to join patreon.com. $3 a month is as little as you have to pay to get every single thing in advance of the channel. So if you become a patron right now, the first 3 chapters of Dune are already up there. And like I said, it should hit the channel sometime about mid to late August, I think, if I did the math correctly. So those are pretty much all my pre-prepared questions. If you guys have any questions that you guys want answered in the chat, you are more than welcome to do so. I'm going to do a quick skim through and see if there are any other questions that came on patreon.com or that came through YouTube here. question, when will the final Spiderwick Chronicles book be out? So today, literally right before this live stream, the premiere of the fourth Spiderwick Chronicles book, The Ironwood Tree, dropped on the channel. So I've been trying to do with kind of these shorter side books, so those being like the Star Wars Jedi Prince series, the Spiderwick Chronicles, the Shadow Children, all of those kind of under 200 series books. I've been trying to do one in each of those series a month. So if today's May 17th, a Friday, then maybe give it 5 weeks and the next book should be up on the channel. I can try to get it out sooner. Let's shoot for middle of June, and then the final of those will be out. After that, I am going to switch over to a series of unfortunate events. I don't know how often I'll get to those books. I know I want to start the first couple of them. My wife actually requested them, and so I wanted to get through the Spiderwick Chronicles before I got to series of unfortunate events, because they're very different, but they feel very similar when you read them, if that makes any sense. The atmosphere of the books is very similar. So let's go. When is Fire and Blood going to be finished? Good question. Right now, I want to say I have about half of Fire and Blood recorded. This is an 800-page book. I have no idea when I can finish the rest of it. My goal was to not rush through, but get through as much as I could prior to the release of House of the Dragon Season 2. And so my goal is to have everything up to where they are in the... Because House of the Dragon has to do with about 2 or 3 chapters of this book, out of like 20 separate chapters. And so my goal was to have everything from the start of Aegon's Conquest to where Season 2 ends in this book up on the channel. And I think we'll be able to do that, but I have no idea when we'll get to Fire and Blood completely. Another common question that I get, and I'm sure someone's going to ask it eventually, is when is Game of Thrones going to be up on the channel? I genuinely have no idea. There are 73 chapters in Game of Thrones, and right now I'm trying to get through a chapter a week on Patreon. And so once all of those chapters are out, then I will post it. But if we're doing one a week and we're only done with like 10 chapters, that still gives us about a year, right? If we're going 52 weeks in a year, there's a lot of time left before that is up on the channel. And I would love to do it as a daily book. But I genuinely don't know. Nintendo fan says, who do you think that Zeus will play? I believe what you're trying to ask is who's going to play Zeus. If you guys are unfamiliar, Zeus, the character in Percy Jackson, was played by Lance Reddick, who sadly passed away prior to the airing of the season. It was a personal illness. I don't know if they've ever revealed what it was. He was fairly young, I believe. I think was he pre-60? But regardless, Lance Reddick, the actor who played Zeus in the series, and did I thought a fantastic job with the performance. Lance Reddick is now deceased. That's a good question. If we're going along similar, like physical, if we want someone who looks and could act like Lance Reddick, I would go with, oh gosh, I have to look it up. If you guys are familiar with the TV show The 100, it was a TV show, I think it was on CW. It's about a group of prisoner kids that live in the future. Earth is uninhabitable. They get sent back down to Earth from space. It's kind of hard to explain. But the president in that show is played by, let me find him here, Isaiah Washington. Isaiah Washington has the potential to give a performance very close to what Lance Reddick did. And so I would love to see Isaiah Washington. However, if they want to go a completely different route, if they want a completely different performance to fit a completely different version of the character, to try to separate it from Lance Reddick as out of respect, I totally get that too. But yeah, I would say if I wanted to cast something, I would say Isaiah Washington. My 10th birthday is in 7 days. Well, congratulations. Happy birthday. Joseph Morrill says, do you plan to read any poems like Edgar Allan Poe, and what about H.P. Lovecraft books? Either of those are on the endless list of books you have. Yeah, that's kind of the key. I would love to read poetry. The one that I've been thinking of dropping on the channel fairly soon, granted I have to record it first, is Rime of the Ancient Mariner by, I think it's by Coleridge. It's in a book by Wordsworth, but I think the poem itself was written by Coleridge. Very good poem. Very long poem. We were talking about my album earlier. There's several elements in my album that is based on that poem. I read it for the first time when I was a senior in high school in AP English, and it's a very visual poem, and it inspired me quite a bit. Not necessarily poetry, but one thing that I've wanted to do more on the channel is plays. So along the lines of Edgar Allan Poe, like you said, I have been thinking about classic literature and maybe doing more Shakespeare stuff, which would help because it's public domain. We don't have to worry about fair use copyright issues. Or the other, not like I said, it's not poetry, but to me, because it's older, it's along kind of those lines of Edgar Allan Poe, is the Sherlock Holmes books. Sherlock Holmes books are fairly long. It would take me a while to record, but it is over which shoulder here? This one. This big stack behind me is the full collection of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's writings on Sherlock Holmes. So I would love to get to those eventually. What did you think of the Canucks game last night? Oh my gosh, I was nervous, very nervous. I'm a Vancouver Canucks fan. I'm a big hockey fan. I grew up in and around Minnesota, if that wasn't obvious by the flag behind me. But I'm a big Vancouver Canucks fan, and last night they beat the Edmonton Oilers to go ahead in the series, so I was very, very happy about that. But yeah, it went down to the wire. I was kind of nervous. When are we going to get part 6 of the 21 Pilot series? Good question. My goal right now, granted I have to finish a little bit of the script, and then I have to record and edit the whole thing. So if I can do that in a week's time, it'll be up before the release of their next album. Their next album comes out next weekend. My goal was and still is to have it up before that. Might not happen, so give it maybe a week afterwards. But yes, I have been actively working at that during the daytime. Also, in advance to that, if you guys are unfamiliar with my second channel, feel free to go look that up. It is called SheetG. That is SHEET space G. You can find it. It's got a very similar logo to this one, just green instead of yellow. And over there, you can find more long-form content. There's a series of 21 Pilots videos. There's a lot of timelines. I have like a 2-hour Doctor Who timeline video over there too, if that's something you're interested in. But the big one is yesterday or the day before, I dropped part 3 of my 11-part NFL timeline series, and my goal is to have part 4 of that and part 5 of that up sometime in the next month. So go check that out. Like I said, SheetG, if that's something you're interested. If you're interested in more long-form content, a little more editing and effort than I put into over on this channel, which is mostly just reading performance. Melissa Smith says, Lance passed away from heart disease. I am very sorry to hear that. I thought I knew it was heart-related, but I didn't know if they ever disclosed what it actually was. But yeah, that's very, very sad, especially someone having an active performance is always sad. It's something I'm familiar with as a Harry Potter fan. We saw that happen with Richard Harris after the second the Chamber of Secrets film. Happened in Game of Thrones a couple times too, but yeah, recastings are always weird, but there's, especially with an actor's death, there's always a feeling there. Star Wars has gone through that with Carrie Fisher. Hunger Games went through that with Philip Seymour Hoffman. Yeah, it's a very common thing to happen, but it's always fairly unfortunate. Nintendo fan says, will you read Out of the Dust by Karen Hess? I will do some research on that. I'm unfamiliar with it, but I'll do some research. Joseph Morrill says, Sherlock Holmes series are my favorite books. I wonder when you would get to those, what your Sherlock Watson Moriarty would sound like. Good question. And I will say this because I've already recorded one of them. My Watson is very much a old-timey London. Like, I know it takes place in the 1890s, but my accent is probably more 1930s, 1940s. But very much a London upper class accent. And then Sherlock is, I don't know if there's a stereotypical Sherlock accent. It's obviously not the one you're going to see in like the TV show. But if there's a stereotypical Sherlock accent, I think that's what I was aiming for. And then Moriarty, I haven't actually come across a story with Moriarty in it yet. So I haven't recorded for Moriarty. Yeah, I'd be very, very curious to see how I approach that when that comes up. I will say, if you're familiar with the Stephen Moffat, Benedict Cumberbatch show, Sherlock, which is how I was really introduced to the Sherlock mythos, I was shocked when I read through A Study in Scarlet how close it is to A Study in Pink, the first episode of that TV show. I thought they took tremendous liberties in the show. That was always the interpretation that I had from what people talked about it. But the first episode specifically is very, very, very close. Like, not word for word, because it's set forth 120 years. But my goodness, the thematic elements in each scene, the way that they set up each scene, the character motivations in each scene, the details in each scene are almost pitch perfect. It's fascinating to see how well they adapted it for a modern audience. Nintendo Fan says it's based from something that happened years ago in 1934. Interesting. Yeah, I am completely in the blue about Karen Hess. I have no idea what the subject material is. I will say, going forward, with books that I'm reading on the channel, so behind me is my list. I have, let's see here. This is my already read pile. This is my to be read pile. And so, sorry, I got to turn toward the microphone, otherwise it's going to sound weird. I talked about a series of unfortunate events. There's a local author that I have been putting off reading because it'll take me about 2 hours in a single sitting, which I need to prepare myself for. And I always prepare myself for it. And then as soon as I get to it in my pile, I'm just like, I can put this off a little longer. Mentioned Sherlock Holmes. We got the 5th book in the Star Wars Jedi Prince series. That one is called Queen of the Empire. We got the 6th Narnia book, The Silver Chair, which I have already finished, Voyage of the Dawn Treader. It's not yet on the channel. It hasn't started on the channel. It is available in its entirety for members and patrons if that's something you're interested in. But Silver Chair is the 6th book. That'll come after that. And then comes a kind of a special project, a book by a YouTuber that I'm very familiar with. It's called Becoming All Elite, The Rise of AEW. It's a wrestling book. Then the 5th Spider book, then the 3rd Shadow Children book, Chalice of the Gods, Cursed Child, Artemis Fowl. The first 5 chapters should be available over on Patreon. Game of Thrones, first 8 or so chapters should be available over on Patreon at the moment. Hunger Games we'll get to after Dune. Demigod Diaries, Good Morning Gorillas, which is the 26th book in the Magic Treehouse series. And then we got Book of Mormon. We'll do that kind of on and off with our Bible readings. Found, which is the first book in Margaret Peterson Haddock's Missing series. The Bald Bandit, which is the 2nd in the A to Z Mysteries series. That's more children's content alongside the Magic Treehouse books. Aragon, Maze Runner, City of Ember, House of Cards, Divergent, the 2nd Diary of a Wimpy Kid book, Red Pyramid from Kane Chronicles, and then Sun and the Star. So those are the books that I'm actively working on in my free time, apart from my read now pile, like I said, which are these 3 books here. Do I have to read Demigod Diaries to understand the future books? No. There are a couple of things in it. The big thing is it foreshadows things. And so, like, Festus the Dragon is mentioned in the Demigod Diary, or the Demigod Files is the one for Percy Jackson. Demigod Diaries is the same thing, but for the Heroes of Olympus. Each one kind of has this slotted in here extra book, right? They have kind of short stories from each of the characters that give a little more depth to the world, a little more side missions. We meet Festus the Dragon in the Percy Jackson one. We also meet Bob the Titan. And so if we get to House of Hades and you guys are like, I have no idea who Bob the Titan is, and I don't remember Percy ever meeting him before, that's because the only time he ever appears before this is in the Demigod Files. Now, it's not important how he loses his memory. It's not important how he's introduced necessarily. But if you're curious where some of these characters come from or the foreshadowing that goes into some of these characters, then yes, you'll want to read Demigod Files or Demigod Diaries. But is it necessary to understand the story? No. As opposed to something like skipping Heroes of Olympus and going straight from the 5th Percy Jackson book to the 6th Percy Jackson book, you're probably going to be a bit confused. Joseph Morrill says, Lightning by Dean Koontz is another I'd recommend. Horror books are always fun to listen to and read. I have wanted to read more horror on the channel. There's a young adult, late teen body horror novel that I have on the channel in the YA singles folder called The Gardener, which I've been told by other people is very thematically similar to Stranger Things. I've never quite got that, but I can see where you're coming from. So if you like Stranger Things, maybe you want to go check that out. I think it's like 4 hours or so in the playlist titled YA Singles. It's called The Gardener by S.A. Bodine. The other, what was I going to say? The other horror, you mentioned Poe, but the other horror book that I've been asked to read quite a bit is just stuff from Stephen King and stuff from R.L. Stine. I'd definitely be more open to reading R.L. Stine stuff on the channel. I think Stephen King, there's some issues that we don't really need to go into details here, but there's some stuff in Stephen King's, some of them, like I won't read it on the channel, and I think you guys know why I won't read it on the channel. I'd be open to reading The Shining. I'd be open to reading The Stand, but there are certain properties, there's certain elements of certain stories that I would be a little uncomfortable having on my channel. But yes, I'd love to get more horror on the channel. Nintendo Fan says, did you buy the second Diary of a Wimpy Kid book? Because I remember you said it in one of the old live streams. Yes. So my brother was just over yesterday. He came back to town and I was like, hey, I was raiding your room at Dad's house the other day and I couldn't find the second Diary of a Wimpy Kid book. Do you have any idea what happened to it? And he goes, well, if it's not there, I have no idea what happened. And I said, okay, that's fine. So I have like the first 7 Diary of a Wimpy Kid books, except for 2. I was missing book 2, which was really weird to me. So yes, I did end up buying the second one just because I couldn't find it anywhere. I searched my house, I searched my dad's house, I searched everywhere, and for whatever reason, Roderick Rules disappeared. So yes, I did finally buy the second book, and hopefully we'll have it up in about a month's time or so, if I have the time to get to it. But the first book is available if you guys want. I'm very proud of my editing at the end of Diary of a Wimpy Kid if you guys want to go check it out. Oliver Finstead says, are you okay with reading any of H.P. Lovecraft stories? Yes, I understand the reservations about reading H.P. Lovecraft, just stuff in his personal life. If you guys are familiar with it, there are problems. It's a case-by-case basis. It always is. And so if people the greater fan base here on the channel, or the greater viewer base, is uncomfortable with me reading Lovecraft for those reasons, then maybe I'll consider not doing it. But in terms of his content, I don't think necessarily that there is anything that I'd be strictly uncomfortable with on the channel. It's very dark. It's very, not demonic necessarily, but just, you know what I mean. Lovecraftian, otherworldly, like it's very, very dark, very deep and scary and mystical. And I don't know how else to describe it other than Lovecraftian is kind of the word that people usually use in reference to stuff that is similar to his works. But if you're asking me if I'll read because of who he was, it's kind of the same thing with J.K. Rowling, right? Like, she says the things she says, and the fan base very obviously doesn't agree with her a lot of the time. But I still love the Harry Potter books. I still love the content that is within the pages of the books. And I find no problem with the books, and I'm happy to share the books. And so that I think that's the official stance that I will have on this channel, but it will be a case-by-case basis. It absolutely will be a case-by-case basis. Let's see here. Joseph Morrill says, if you need a good Stephen King book that isn't it, 11/22/63 is one of my favorite. Yes, I remember when that. Do I remember when that book came out? That's a recent book, correct? I'm familiar with it, and I know that they made a limited series about it recently. I could be completely blowing smoke right now, but I think that's the case. I would love to read that one. I've heard that's pretty good, and I haven't read it. I do own it. I'm physically looking at it right now on my bookshelf, but I've never actually read it, and I'd be happy to do so. Oliver Finstead says, "Yeah, I love Lovecraft's works, but it's nasty sometimes." Yeah, it's weird. It's weird, and it takes it. It's not for everybody, for sure. It's very much a niche audience. But that being said, I think I'd be happy to do so. I own Cult of Cthulhu and a lot of the Cthulhu mythos stuff. And some of that, just from a religious standpoint, is very fascinating. And I think that's stuff that I'd like to explore on the channel eventually. I don't know if I have time for it in the recent future, or in the near future. But same thing I always say. We'll get to it when we get to it. Joseph Morrill says, yes, they made a show and it's so good. I have not seen the show either, but I will add it to my list of shows that is currently very, very extensive. I just got done watching Baby Reindeer. I don't know that I would recommend. I loved it, but I wouldn't say I'd recommend it, especially to the people on this channel. It's some pretty heavy stuff. My sister is a psychologist, and she said she watched it knowing the stuff going in, and it still hit her really hard. So it's one of the #1 shows in the world right now. But I just got done watching that one, and now I mentioned The 100 earlier. I'm rewatching The 100 at the moment as well. Question: have you watched, or are you familiar with the Avatar: The Last Airbender? I am. I mentioned earlier in this live stream, I'm a huge Avatar: The Last Airbender fan. I watched the first episode when it aired back in 2005. In fact, I mentioned this before, and I won't go into too much detail, but I remember the setup for it. I remember the live show on Nickelodeon setup for it. I remember vividly where I was and what I was doing, and how much I liked the first 2 episodes of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Yeah, I have seen the show. Very familiar with the show. The live action show. I saw the movie in theaters. I'm very familiar with Avatar: The Last Airbender and Legend of Korra. Would be very happy to answer questions about that too, because I do know a lot about the mythos and the mythology of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Melissa Smith says, have you ever heard of the Forbidden Doors series by Bill Myers? They would be a fun read. Excuse me. For preteen teen genre. I enjoyed them growing up. I'm familiar with them. I've never read them. So I will... Excuse me. So sorry. I must have swallowed really fast earlier. But yes, I am familiar with them. I've never read them. I would be very happy to do so. What other series would you guys be interested in me reading? Just because I have my list in front of me, and I would be happy to jot stuff that you guys have down. So we've already talked about the Penderwicks. We've already talked about Forbidden Doors. We've talked about Stephen King. What kind of stuff would you guys be interested in me reading? Just let me know in the chat, and I'd love to jot some stuff down. Oliver Finstead says, if you want to watch a Lovecraft movie that's a bit disturbing, you should give Color Out of Space a watch. Maybe. I'll consider it. If I have the time to do so, I'll add it to my list. Oh my god! Sorry. Freaked out. So, I got to give you guys a little backstory to my freak out and the response I'm about to give to the message in the chat. There are books that I've read in my past, whether it be elementary school, middle school, that sort of thing, that I've always wanted to read on the channel. And sometimes I just forget about them. Or books that I haven't read in a very long time that I want to come back to. And so, for me, one of those books was The Gardener, which I mentioned earlier. It's the kind of the young adult body horror thing that I mentioned. My backstory with The Gardener is my 6th grade teacher started reading it to us in class. It got a little too mature for maybe a 6th grade audience, and he was aware of that and basically told us that and said, hey, we got to stop reading this. You're more than welcome to read it in your free time, whatever. So I went for the next 14 years not ever reading this book, but it was still always in my mind. It was like, I remember this book from 6th grade. I remember what it was called. I remember what it was about. And I want to finish it someday. And so when I started this channel, it was one of those, it was like, I need to read The Gardener on the channel because I've never finished it. I want to know how it ends, that sort of thing. Another one of those is, like I said, Skellig earlier. The third one that I just remembered I haven't read on the channel yet and really need to and really want to, Joseph Morrill, is The Giver. The Giver is a fantastic book. I have given speeches on The Giver. I have never really told you guys what I do for my main job. But one of the things that I do in my main job is I speak. I publicly speak a lot and present things to people. And so one of the things that I have repeatedly done in my speeches is talk about The Giver. And specifically the color scene, the apple scene, I've used several times. I've talked about the absence of love. Anyways, I love The Giver. Was a little disappointed in the film, but I love the book, and I would absolutely love to cover it on the channel. So thank you for reminding me of that. That is going to the top of my list for personal reasons. Nintendo fan says, I'm reading Diary of a Wimpy Kid, The Third Wheel. I got it like last month. I can't remember which number Third Wheel is. I don't know that I've ever read Third Wheel. I think I've only read the first 6 or 7. And I can't remember how many there are now. There might be like 20 now. That series has been going on forever. Joseph Morrill says, the mythos to those books is interesting. I love rereading the books. Which books are we talking about here? Question. Nintendo fan says that's book number 7. Okay, maybe I have read it then. Third Wheel. Trying to remember which one I read through. Cabin Fever, I think it's 6. So maybe, okay. Yeah. I may have just read through 6 then, because I think Cabin Fever was the last one I read. But yeah, I'll try to get to Roderick Rules sometime in the next month or so. I did have a lot of fun reading the first one. In fact, I was laughing so hard when not for the content necessarily, but those books came out when I was about 8, I think, and my brother was a few years younger than me, and so we used to read those books with my dad, just in my bedroom, and that was like a family reading time with me. And I remember laughing so hard with my dad and my brother at some of these jokes when I was 8 that as I'm rereading them, almost 20 years later, it's like these are really funny to me still. Like, I remember how much fun I had reading these. So when I was recording the Diary of a Wimpy Kid books, or the first one, I had to stop myself because I was laughing so hard at some of these and just the memories that I have with my dad and my brother in reading these. Joseph Morrill says, I mean The Giver, like the universe behind it. I did know there was one other book. If there are 3 others, I haven't read them. The other 3 books that are after it are so fascinating to me. I'll have to read them because I think I was only aware of one of them, and I've never read it. So I will for sure read The Giver soon. In fact, I don't know if I own it. I gotta find my L's. Sorry, my face is probably really funny right now. I don't own The Giver, which actually fascinates me. So first of all, I have to buy The Giver, and then I have to read it on the channel, and I'm hoping to have that out to you within a month. So thank you for giving me that idea. But then I also have to read the other 3, which I have never done before. Infected Phantom says, do you have any interest in reading books like Project Hail Mary or The Martian? I don't. I'm unfamiliar with Project Hail Mary. The Martian, yes, I think I'd be happy to read The Martian. I love the film. I have read the book. I really enjoyed the film. I think I'll add it to my list. I have no promises of when I can get there, but that is certainly something that I'd love to read. There are very few books that I would not be willing to read on the channel. There's a variety of reasons for why I wouldn't read a book on the channel, but I'm not set on sticking to sci-fi and fantasy. It's pretty much just when I can get to the stuff that I want to read. So I will definitely add it to my list. Oliver Finstead says, do you know anything about the Malazan Book of the Fallen series? Give me one sec. Let me see if I... Usually it's cover art that I have to remember. So Book of the Fallen. Malazan Book of the Fallen. I've seen them before. I've never read them. I'll check it out. Hold on one sec. Maybe I have read it. Garden of the Moon. Maybe not. I don't think so. But I'll definitely check it out because that looks very similar to just stuff that we would cover on the channel. Especially, it reminds me of Aragon. So that's you could absolutely tell me what it's about. But I'd love to check it out, and I'd love to explore it on the channel and see if people connect with it. I'll probably go for about 15 more minutes. So if you guys want to ask any more questions or want anything else answered in the chat, you are more than welcome to ask. Again, I do apologize for yesterday. Had some technical issues. My Wi-Fi was cutting in and out. My laptop wasn't maintaining its battery with OBS open, and so I kept losing the quality of the stream, and I wanted to give you guys a clean stream, and so we had to shift it to today. I do apologize for that. Next live stream I'm hoping to do on the 30th, which is 2 Thursdays from today. Infected Phantom says Project Hail Mary is by the same creator as The Martian. I kind of figured that, just the way you asked the question, but I am unfamiliar with its content. If you wanted to share what it's about, that would be awesome. Because I genuinely, I've never actually heard of it. Of course, I've heard of The Martian because of the film, and then read the book because of the film. The other one people ask a lot, especially while we're talking about books into films, is Ender's Game, or Ready Player One. I would be very happy to read those two books as well. Oh, Joseph, you are just giving me the best ideas ever. Don't tell my wife. She says, if you're curious about buying the Giver books, apparently hardcover of all 4 of them is like 40-ish bucks on Amazon. Well, I know what I'm doing after this. I know exactly what I'm doing after the stream is over. Because I would absolutely love to read that on the channel. Nintendo Fans says, I might try to make a book. I thought of it late last year. If I ever make it, will you read it on the channel? Well, it always depends. I mean, and I mean this in the nicest way possible, because I don't want people to be offended by this. But yes, first of all, I would love to read other people's works on the channel. If you guys have books that you would want me to read, or stories that you have written that you are comfortable with that are finished, then yes. I will say I think it would be beneficial for you to have it through an editor first, and definitely have a professional, just like reviewer, read through it. After which case, if it's something that I think people on the channel would like, if I think it is a story that is complete and congruent enough to be read on this channel and people would enjoy it, then yes, I would absolutely love to do that. But yeah, I've actually, there are two people on Discord have reached out to me about reading their stories on the channel, one of which hasn't got back to me after I said yes, and the other one, their book is unfinished, but they sent it to me and asked for pointers on it, and I was actually fascinated. First of all, their mythology was fantastic, but then just their writing was very coherent. It was a first draft, and their writing was fantastic. So as soon as that's done, I would love to share that with you guys. Joseph Morrill, you make smart financial purchases. Yeah, that's why I said don't tell my wife. Cube Melons is in the chat. Welcome. Very happy to have you here. We're just kind of discussing just books to read in the future, but that doesn't have to be the limit of our conversation. If you guys have questions about anything else, stuff that we already read on the channel that you guys want answered, I'm happy to do so. Infected Phantom says, Project Hail Mary is a book about researching a cure for a bacteria or germ by traveling to a nearby solar system. Interesting. You said Project Hail Mary, and for whatever reason, I had Interstellar in my head. And similar journey idea, but obviously very different stories. But I'm a huge fan of Interstellar, the movie. And so if if it's similar to something like that, I would love to check it out. I'll check it out regardless, but yeah. Any other questions you guys might have? I'll probably stick around, like I said, for about 15 more minutes. Is that a St. Louis Battlehawks shirt? It is. I have had this. I've been a Battlehawks fan since 2020. The original, not the original, but the... So the XFL has basically started 3 separate times. It started in 2001. It was revived in 2020. COVID hit. It ended. Vince McMahon sold it to Dwayne Johnson. Dwayne Johnson started it last year. Now, of course, it's the UFL. But yes, technically, this is my local team. I live nowhere near Missouri, but they are technically the closest team to me. And so I started following them in 2020. And then they look pretty hot this year. I'm excited. Cube Melon says there's a book based on Christopher Nolan's Interstellar. I didn't know that. As far as I know, there isn't. I'm just saying Infected Phantom was talking about a book called Project Hail Mary, which is by the same author who did The Martian. And the premise, at least as little as I know about it from what Infected Phantom has talked about in the chat, the idea of it appeals to my senses of liking Interstellar, if that makes any sense. So if the stories are similar, then I think I would like it very much. But as far as I know, no, Interstellar is not based on a book. Joseph Morrill says, you mentioned Avatar The Last Airbender. What bending style would you like to have, and who's your favorite character? I swear if you say Toph. Well, just because you said that, I won't say Toph. Zuko's always been my favorite character. Zuko's backstory is fascinating. He's one of the best written characters in television history. Genuinely. I'm not taking the mick with that one. Zuko is a fantastic character. I would say the 2 styles of bending that I find the most fascinating visually are Earth and Fire. I've always been more of a fan of the Earth Kingdom and just Earth in general. Like when you take those quiz, what elements are you? I've always been Earth. However, I got to remember, because is it Shaolin? I think it's Shaolin. That is the style of kung fu that they use in firebending. Is probably the best looking of all of the martial arts in the show. I love standard firebending. And my love for the Fire Nation has grown so much over the years. Obviously, they're the main villains in the first couple seasons, but that's rough, buddy. Yeah. Yeah, I own every episode of Avatar: The Last Airbender. I own every episode of Avatar. I own all 4 seasons of Legend of Korra too. Be very happy to talk about Korra too, but most people don't want to. So, Strider Hell's Rider says, please let us read Mark of Athena on basic YouTube for like 1 day. I can't find it anywhere. We're doing daily chapters, so the first 14 chapters are available if you want. And the first half of Mark of Athena will be up in a couple weeks, and then the second part should be up in like 3 weeks after that. But if you want more chapters faster, you're more than welcome to join Patreon for $3 a month or more. I am not through it entirely, so I don't even have like a full version to even give you. I am through the first 37 chapters of a 52 chapter book. So yeah, I couldn't give you a full version if I had it, but the first half of it is available on Patreon and should be up on the channel in a couple weeks. But the first 14 chapters are available to you on the main channel. Nintendo Fan says, will you read Rowley Jefferson's Awesome Friendly Adventure? It's been a long time since I read it, and I don't even know if it's like a story that you could read as an audiobook. So I gotta go review it and double check it. But if it is, then maybe. Joseph Morrill says, never saw Korra up until 2020. What an interesting story. Good show for sure. It gets more hate than it deserves. Completely agree. Season 3 of Legend of Korra is better than Season 1 of Avatar, in my opinion. The Last Airbender. On my second channel, I mentioned earlier, Sheet G, SHEET space G. I have a ranking of all the Avatar seasons, in my personal opinion. And I am pretty sure I ranked Changes, which is the third Korra season above water. Season 4 is really good too. It's not quite up to season 3's par. 1 is 2 is really bad for a variety of reasons, but you can find my opinions elsewhere on all of those. Infected Phantom says, House of Hades is my favorite Percy Jackson book. I am excited to reread it. I have not reread it in a long time. It's been about 10 years since I've read House of Hades, and I'm very, very curious to see what my thoughts are on it. I remember liking it very, very much the first time I read it, and so I'm hoping to have those same opinions now. I don't know that I do or will, but I'm excited to find out. But yeah, Mark of Athena is my personal favorite, but House of Hades is typically the answer people give if you ask them what the best Percy Jackson book is. Melissa Smith says, it's been nice to meet you and put a face to the voice. I'm very happy to do so. Subscribe and we'll enjoy diving in. Thanks for all your hard work. Have a great night. You as well. Have a great night. Let's see here. Joseph Morrill says, since I mentioned The Giver, Frank the Mighty is another book I just remembered about just now. I've never read it. I will, again, add it to my very extensive list. I'm happy to keep adding to this list. It's just getting really long. Oliver Finstead says, I completely agree. Zahir is probably my favorite villain. The only thing that would have made Zahir better is if they would have let him keep the beard. Beard Zahir is goated. Yeah, Zahir is a terrifying villain. His motivations are sometimes a little... The biggest criticism of Season 3 of Legend of Korra has been the dumbing... Or the kid... How do I describe it? The dumbing down... or the kiddishness in the way that they approach anarchism. But Season 3 is very good. Zahir is a very good villain. Zahir's sidekicks, for lack of a better term, Pali, and I'm trying to remember the other two. I can't remember off the top of my name. Minghua is one of them, and I can't remember the guy. But yeah, I love Avatar, period. But yeah, Season 3 of Legend of Korra was like... Because you have to get through the worst season to get to the best season, and it's like you get through the slog of Season 2, and then finally you get to Season 3, and it's like, oh, this show's actually good. So, Nintendo Fan says, will you read every Diary of a Wimpy Kid book? Probably not, but I will get as far as I can if people are still interested. So my goal is to at least get through the first 4, and if... So right now we're at about 3,000 subscribers, right? A little shy of it. 2,800, I think. At 3,000 subscribers, there's really no reason that a full-length book on my channel doesn't get 100 views. If we get to a point where a Diary of a Wimpy Kid book is on the channel for a month and it doesn't reach 100 views, I think that's when I'll stop. Does that make any sense? So, for example, I put out a chapter of Mark of Athena every day, and in 2 weeks' time it has 1,000 views. If I put a full-length Diary of a Wimpy Kid version on the channel and I give it a month and it's still at like 70 views, then to me it's not worth continuing, because as the series goes on, I'm not going to be as interested in it anymore, and I'm not going to enjoy reading it as much as I will. And so, yeah, it's kind of sounds weird, but there's a lot of books I want to get to, and if the stuff that I'm putting out that I personally am not even enjoying that much is not attracting people to the channel, then to me it's losing the purpose of reading it anyways. Oliver Finstead says, yeah, some of it is kid-friendly, but there are some brutal moments in Season 3. You're absolutely right. And I think that's why the confusion comes, because they dumb down the political ideologies, but at the same time, you have a straight-up death scene on Nickelodeon TV. Like, he straight up murders a woman on Nickelodeon. And it's like, well, and actually, sorry, I don't think it aired on Nickelodeon, but it is a Nickelodeon TV show. But yeah, it's Season 3 is brutal. And then there's the whole torture scene. And it's so much darker than anything we ever got in the original Avatar: The Last Airbender. So the fact that they would allow that, but then felt the need to dumb down the political stuff for a children's audience has always struck me and a lot of other people as weird, if that makes any sense. Nintendo Fan, good luck tomorrow in your soccer tournament. I hope you do well. Any other questions you guys have in the last few minutes that I have here? I'm very happy to answer anything you guys want to know. Oliver Finstead, not to forget his girlfriend getting her head blown up. Yeah, a little bit of a spoiler, but yeah, that's a pretty brutal moment. That's technically 2 death scenes on camera in that, or on screen. We don't see it. It's very obviously implied what happens. But yeah, it's season 3 is goated with the sauce, as the kids like to say these days. I'm getting old. Cube Melon says, how big is your backlog for stuff to read on the channel? Good question. So if by backlog you mean like stuff I've already recorded that's not up on the channel, excuse me, sorry. It rained yesterday, and so my allergies are really popping. My backlog, so for Patreon, it's not very long. So Patreon is about 3 to 4 days. And that's really only in case of emergencies. Like if my wife went to the hospital today and I wasn't able to record for the next week, I would want to give you guys as much content as I can without having to take a break. That's why I have the backlog. On the regular channel, Percy Jackson is about a month. All of my other stuff, so like Dune, probably won't be up on the channel for another 3 months. So my backlog is pretty extensive. When it comes to like the side books, like Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, I've been done with for a couple months now. Voyage of the Dawn Treader, I've been done with for a month now, and now Dune won't be up on the channel for another few months. How much is planned? Actively, so probably through December right now. So by December, we should be on, I think, the 3rd Kane Chronicles book, if I counted the chapters correctly. So by Christmas, or by New Year's, I'm hoping to be on the 3rd Kane Chronicles book, and done with Chronicles of Narnia, probably on Catching Fire, which is the 2nd in the Hunger Games books, the 3rd one that I will have read on the channel, if that makes sense. So we'll go through all of the Percy Jackson books, all the Heroes of Olympus books, Chalice of the Gods, Wrath of Triple Goddess, and then we'll do we'll get through Silver Chair, Dune, Hunger Games, Last Battle from Narnia, and then hopefully then be on Kane Chronicles and Catching Fire. Thank you. Joseph Morrill says, no one remembers this man. He deserved better. Well, if we're talking about on-screen deaths, then yes, we remember that. That was a very controversial thing to happen on Nickelodeon television when it happened. So I remember that. Good episode. Infected Phantom says, I'm reading Kane Chronicles right now. They're very good. I have only read through all of them once. I've read the first 2 multiple times. I finished the 3rd one once. So it's been a long time. I'm excited to revisit them. I've recorded the first couple chapters. They're not available anywhere. I'm curious to see how I'll like them in a few months' time and if I want to redo anything from my performance. Nintendo Fan says, sometimes I read along with your audiobooks like Percy Jackson. You're more than welcome to do so. Some people just listen to audiobooks. Some people read along with them, which is totally fine either way. I will say this. If you will notice mistakes. You will notice mistakes a lot more if you're reading along than if you're just listening to it. I read very fast. I jump lines when I read. And so sometimes I bridge the gap between what is on the page and what is in my head with certain transitional words that aren't the words that are in the books. And so you will probably notice that quite a bit. Or like if I have to turn a page and I skip a couple words, that's why, is because it happens on a page turn. So usually, like if I get to the end of a page and the sentence isn't complete, sometimes I'll finish the sentence with what I think is going to happen, and it's different than what's on the next page, if that makes any sense. Just because I want the fluidity of my reading to be fluid, for lack of a better term. Any last questions? Then I'm gonna call it a night and see you guys in 2 weeks then. I'm going to double check the channel and the Discord just to see if anyone's asked anything. Can you guys hear the thunder behind me? It is storming outside again. It's been really rainy in my area. I don't know how the weather is in your hometowns, but... Infected Phantom says, when I first found your channel, I played the audiobooks to 75 because of how fast you read. You're more than welcome to do so. I always get a kick out of people who complain about it in the comments. They're like, you read too fast. And I'm like, slow it down. Like, YouTube has the option to slow it down. So if I'm not going to slow my cadence down for a variety of reasons. First of all, it's unnatural to me. It's uncomfortable to me. And it also saves me time. If I were to slow it down, it would take me longer to read each chapter. But if you need to slow it down, then you're totally reasonable to do that. I just can't stand when people complain about it. I'm sorry. I'm not saying you're complaining about it. There are people that like criticize me and they're like, too fast. You need to upload this slower. And I'm like, not going to. Figure out how the playback button works. That's probably my favorite criticism because it happens probably once a day on my my Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe book. Someone yesterday went, they were like, too fast. I'm out of here. And I'm like, okay, like, congrats. Like, find another reader then. I'm not going to change it. Nintendo fan says, I really want to get Hunger Games for my birthday in 7 days. Well, if you become a $25 member or more on Patreon, you get a free monthly book. And just for your birthday, I would make that book The Hunger Games. That's a plug for my Patreon, by the way. If you guys go to Patreon and want to join the book club, for $25 a month, you get a free book every single month. I think there's about 8 people who are currently a part of the book club. And so the beginning of every month, I send you a free book at that $25 a month or more. If that's something you're capable of doing. Nintendo fan, I know you're not. I'm kind of making a joke, but... Infected Phantom, yeah, I think it's funny. I thought you sped up your recordings. A lot of people do. I do talk really fast, and that is a problem I've had my entire life. And like I said, if I could slow myself down and make myself comfortable with it, I probably would. But it saves me time. It keeps a 35-minute chapter from being a 45-minute chapter. So, a couple of plugs that I want to give, because I haven't done this in a while. Cube Melon says, is anyone going to tell these people that there's a playback speed option on YouTube? I've said it many a time in the comments, and people still... then they'll respond to my comment and say, it doesn't matter, it shouldn't be that fast. And I'm like, well, okay, find another reader. But I did want to give a huge shout out to, first of all, my upper tier patrons. So you see Champion Level and Kilo Worm. Those are the $25 a month or more patrons. John Buck, Donald Easter, Dalton Bailey, Kata Batty 19, Charles Jacobson, Lydia Bryant. There's one that's not on there because it hasn't been updated yet, and that is Zhukov, Crawford. Zhukov Crawford. I want to give a huge shout out to as well. League 1 and Giga Worm, those are Riley Lang and Cameron Stevens. League 2 and Mega Worm, Hessa Al-Habashi, Brandon Doty, Bella Joy a second time, Victoria Libretto, Rania, Rock and Ryan 99, and Finn Zern. And then, if I can find it here, give me 1 sec to find it. I wanted to give a shout out to, actually, let me do this real quick. I got to go change this picture, and I don't know if it's going to let me. No, it's not going to let me. I do need to update this. This is out of date, but I want to give a shout out to Bree W, Duncan Burley, Aaron Marie Thompson, Faye Coy, Hannah O'Brien, Hardip Singh, Kate, Kevin Fernandez, Luke Smith, Matt Sukur, Patrick, Srinija Srinivasan, Sinclair Campbell, Taylor Grande, Trey Empire, and Alexei Staryakov. For everything that you do for me here on the channel. I could not do this without your support. I would still do this without your support. You guys just make it a lot easier. You guys take the stress out of me finding time out of my day to do this. It is so nice to have a bit of a financial cushion in order to do this. It's wonderful. It's wonderful to have this community. Like I said, I would do it without the money, but you guys make it so much easier to spend time away from my family and give me a reason to do so. There are a number of you who I haven't updated that chart yet, and I will make sure that is fixed for the next time. Mariko756 says, it's like you're talking as fast as the voice in your mind. It's great. That's kind of what I'm going for, especially with the Percy Jackson books, because it is a POV narration, strictly first person. And so that's kind of what I was going for with that. I also wanted to mention my merchandise. I believe there's a link in the description below. If you guys will be familiar with my Sea of Monsters audiobook, there is a point where I make a pretty significant gaffe in saying I ate at the kitchen table. It is the most commented error that I've ever made on my audio recordings, and my wife said I should make it into a shirt, and so we did. So there's a link below where you guys can get a premium t-shirt, a premium long sleeve t-shirt, a pullover hoodie, and a crew neck sweatshirt, anywhere in the range of $20 to, I think, $40 for the hoodie. But if that's something you guys are interested in, please go check that out and feel free to support. Then there are also links to Patreon. There's a link to the Discord if you guys are interested in carrying this conversation over somewhere else with like-minded individuals. I think there's about 230 members that we have over there on the Discord. Link to that in the description below. I have a bunch of other channels you guys can check out. SheetG, I already mentioned that, SHEET space G. That is where I do all my long-form stuff. I do timeline videos. I do essays. I do my opinions on other stuff. You guys can find all of that over there. And then trying to think if there's anything else that I missed. Brory Imara says, more Mark of Athena, please. Yes, you'll get a chapter every day. So if you want about 20 more chapters that aren't on the channel, then you're more than welcome to join Patreon for $3 a month. Infected Phantom says, I was going to ask if there was a story behind that. That's so funny. Yes. If you're talking about the error, there isn't. I just said it wrong. But yeah, the I ate the kitchen table shirt, my wife thought it would be a really fun idea. So Joseph Morrill says, when the second series of Percy Jackson came out, it was interesting to get multiple POVs. I completely agree. Some people really hate it, especially because Percy's not one of them for the first book. But I think, especially when we get to Mark of Athena and we finally get Annabeth's POV, I think it bridges a lot of gaps in just where people are coming from. I think it's a fantastic idea. I love multiple POVs. My own book that I mentioned earlier has multiple POVs, so you guys can check those out. That was the other thing I wanted to mention. If you guys want to check out my own writings, go check out the Radiation Effect playlist. First 8 chapters are there. If you guys have questions or things that you want to comment on, you're more than welcome to do so. With that being said, if you guys have any other questions, jump out of this chat and go to the comment section below. Feel free to drop anything you have in either those comments or comments on respective videos, and I'm always happy to answer them next time we have a live stream. So I will see you in 13 days. Very, very happy to do so. Thank you very much. I love all of you and everything that you do for me personally as part of this experience, and I can't thank you guys enough for what you guys do for me. So we'll see you next